Hello and welcome back to another fantasy football video. Hope you're all doing well. Today I've got a little watch list ahead of Game Week 11, taking a look in particular at those players who performed well in Game Week 10. But just because they performed well doesn't mean that they necessarily will be good options going forward from Game Week 11. So in this video I'm going to be analysing those players and assessing whether they are. Don't forget that hit that like button and that subscribe button and comment down below any players that you are thinking of bringing in for Game Week 11. And without further ado, let's get straight on into this one. So the first set of players that we are taking a look at are the midfielders. They've been outperforming the other positions recently, especially the defenders who are not performing particularly well. With a lot of people looking to play 4 and even 5 midfielders, some of these players could be worth a shout. And some people will be looking for budget options. And talking of, the first man we are looking at is Ebery Eze of Crystal Palace. Now the main positives for Eze is that he gets himself on set pieces, sharing them with Michael Elise, free kicks and corners. He scoops up bonus points when he does contribute, picking up 3 bonus points against Leeds. His expected goal return is just under 1 in 2, and he's only got 2 assists and 1 goal so far this season, which means he's currently underperforming his stats. Crystal Palace also have a good run of fixtures up until the World Cup, so he is a player that you could literally just stick into your team and leave him there, and that is, for me, one of the better ways of playing FPL, because you just kind of ride through the variance and will just pick up the points whenever the player does get them. He's been starting consistently so far this season, which he didn't manage to do last season, starting in every single game. Now, it begs the question, is he actually worth getting into your team? I would say if you do have enough money for his Crystal Palace teammate Wilfried Zaha, then I would be going for him. Zaha is 1.8 million more expensive, but he does offer better attacking output and is also on penalties. With that being said, Eze has actually only scored 4 less points so far this season due to the fact that he's picked up more bonus points and actually been brought off the pitch to pick up clean sheet points, and certain times has made himself up, so he's only scored 4 less points. Talking of budget options, the next player we're looking at is Philip Binning of Bournemouth, coming in at 5.3 million. Could he be a good asset going forward? He's just scored back-to-back goals, so his confidence is going to be riding high. However, as you can see here, his expected goal returns is only 0.17. That means he's currently way outperforming his stats. Bournemouth do have good fixtures, and at Game Week 12, when a lot of people will be benching their Manchester City and Arsenal assets because they do blank, Billing and Bournemouth play against Southampton. So he could be a good option to maybe stick on the bench every now and again and play him in that game week and some of the other game weeks when Bournemouth have a good fixture, because their fixtures, like Palace's, are good going forward up until the World Cup. But as I say, the main thing with Billing at the minute is that I do feel like he's overperforming his stats. And is he going to consistently get returns going forward? As a budget option, we're not necessarily looking for players that are going to consistently get returns, but I do think that Billing has scored most of his points now in the last 2 game weeks for the rest of the run up until the World Cup. Out of the 2 budget options, I would be looking towards Ebery Eze myself. I think he's going to be filled with confidence after scoring that Leeds game, and is just generally a part of a Palace side that looks much better going forward than Bournemouth. The next player we are looking at is Jared Bowen of West Ham. I thought I had to put him in here. Now he scored a back-to-back goals, and West Ham are starting to look like the side that were really pushing for Europe towards the end of last season. Coming in at 8.1 million, there are quite a few options now around that 8 million mark. Some of the other ones that we will come to that people are now looking towards, that's spreading the midfield across the kind of 4th and 5th spots. His expected goal returns is almost 1 in 2, but the big thing that we found out on the weekend from Jared Bowen is that he's now stepping up and taking penalties. That is massive from an FPL perspective, because he doesn't even necessarily have to have a good game, but someone could win a penalty and he could step up and score it. He's a player that's getting very consistent minutes, playing 90 minutes in each game. And as I say, West Ham are starting to look much better. Their fixtures, I would actually argue, are pretty good. They play against Southampton and Liverpool away, both sides who respectively conceded 4 and 3 goals at the weekend. And so I think that Bowen has potential going forward. It just begs the question, is he actually the best asset at that price bracket? Now, another player at that price bracket is Phil Foden, coming in at 8.2 million. He's one of the highest scoring FPL players so far this season, and you can see that his expected goal returns is clear of any of the other midfielders, coming at 0.78. The big sort of question around Foden is that game week 12 when Manchester City do blank, is it really worth bringing him in for one game week before then, especially when they play Liverpool? But saying that, Liverpool have not been defensively good, conceding 3 goals in each of the last 2 games, and if Foden were to go and pick up a goal and assist like he did at the weekend, then he could actually be well worth bringing in. For me, I would only be bringing him in if I had the ability to transfer him out for game week 12, or you don't have 3 Arsenal or Manchester City assets, so then you could literally just put him on the bench, and going forward from game week 13, he looks like a good option to own. Unfortunately, for those that do own him, he didn't make it to the 60th minute, so they lost 2 points there. But hey ho, he managed to pick up a goal and assist, so I feel like you just kind of, you run with it and you take that. Another player at that price bracket is Bukayo Saka, and a lot of people have their eye on him after he managed to pick himself up a brace against Liverpool, scoring a penalty and tucking away a nice little through ball from Martinelli. Similar discussion to Foden. Arsenal do obviously blank in game week 12, so I wouldn't be bringing him in unless you have that ability to transfer him out or to bench him. Now, Arsenal do play against Leeds in game week 11, so Saka could easily score enough points in that game, especially against a Leeds side that don't look particularly good at the back. After that, Arsenal do have very good fixtures going forward from game week 13, so Saka is definitely one that I myself have an eye on. Then we're going to move on and take a look at some of the attackers. With the attackers this week, apart from Haaland, it was majoritively differential players that were picking up the goals. The first man that we're taking a look at is Odsonne Edouard of Crystal Palace, now scoring back-to-back goals, picking himself up 2 bonus points against Leeds, and coming in at 5.3 million. He could be a viable option going forward. Now, the main negative about Edouard in previous games, in previous seasons, has been that there's been a lot of rotation between him and Mateta. I think that's going to slow down a little bit with how Edouard played in that Leeds game. He was really holding the ball up well and also took the goal very nicely. With expected goal return of 0.4, we're not necessarily expecting him to score in every single game, but at that price bracket, he offers a very good solution to the Mitrovic injury problem that we do currently have. A quick word on Mitrovic. A lot of people benched him this week with the expectation that he was going to be playing against Bournemouth. That looks like it could be a little bit in doubt at the minute, with some of the comments that Silva has come out with really bemoaning the fact that Mitrovic ended up playing in the Serbia game against Norway. They could actually end up missing him for that Bournemouth game, and I think that Edouard offers a nice cheap alternative. They have good fixtures, as we mentioned so far, with Ebere Eze playing against the Leicester side that look weak defensively at the minute, and then playing against Wolves in game week 12. One thing that I would mention is that due to the fact that game week 11 to game week 12, there is only a 2 or 3 day gap in between when Crystal Palace play their games. It could well be that Edouard gets benched from Mateta just out of pure rotation. So if you're going to bring him in, I would bring him in this week because he will be playing against Leeds, because he has scored the 2 goals in a row, and I think that Patrick Vieira will see that and continue to play him. But for that Wolves game, I would be wary that he could get benched. Another player that could offer a viable solution to the Mitrovic problem is Dominic Solanke of Bournemouth, managing to pick himself up 2 assists at the weekend. A lot of FPL managers will be very happy with that, as I've seen that plenty of people have been bringing him in. Like with Edouard, he has good fixtures going forward, and at only 0.4 million more expensive, you basically just have to decide for yourself which one is the better option. Edouard with that risk of being rotated, whereas Solanke is getting solid 90 minutes in every single game. Crystal Palace the better attack. We've not actually seen Bournemouth win a penalty so far this season, but there is a lot of speculation and high likelihood that Solanke will step up and take penalties if they do win one, because last season in the Championship, whenever he was on the pitch, he did take penalties. So that is another bonus for Solanke, similar to Bowen. If he is not playing particularly well, but Bournemouth win a penalty, then he could step up and take it, and hopefully for him clean up the bonus points. A player that I really do have my eye on, and I think is a very good swap for Mitrovic, is Scamacca of West Ham, scoring an absolutely delightful goal at the weekend against Fulham. Some may argue that it should have been disallowed, but either way, it was a beautiful finish, dinked over the top of Leno's head, and he's just generally looking like a very good progressive player. With an expected goal return of 0.42, I actually think it would be higher than that. It's just a little bit skewed because he's had a couple of performances off of the bench, and it's very hard to judge a player when they've only been playing off the bench, but he's now scored in a back-to-back games, and also coming off of the international international break where he scored for Italy. Scamacca for West Ham looks like a decent option. In terms of negatives for him, Antonio did come off the bench and score and pick up 3 bonus points as well. So Antonio is definitely fighting for that attacking spot. And it seems as though David Moyes only really wants to play one out-and-out striker. And as I mentioned with Edouard, with the fact that between game week 11 and 13, teams play 3 games within the span of 1 week, we could easily see some rotation of Scamacca and Antonio. And with the fact that Scamacca is 1.4 million more expensive than Edouard and 1 million more than Solanke, if you need to use that money elsewhere, then I would be looking towards those cheaper options. But as a straight swap for Mitrovic, I do think the Scamacca is one that I've got my eye on. Then the premium man, Harry Kane, looks like a very viable option at the minute. The only other premium assets that are performing well at the minute is Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne. Salah and Son at the minute just aren't worth getting into your teams, especially with the fact that Son is likely to get rotated and the fixtures that Salah has currently don't look particularly good. Kane has been very consistent so far this season, only blanking in 1 game. As you can see there, he is significantly high in terms of expected return. Basically, you're expected 1 return per game from Harry Kane, and that is just really, really nice. He offers a captaincy option in game week 12 when Haaland does blank with Spurs playing against Manchester United. Kane did pick up a little knock at the weekend, but we do have the Champions League games coming midweek, and that'll give us some vital information over whether Harry Kane is fit or not. He plays against Everton at home in game week 11, so he is a player that I'm actually quite worried about not owning. I think he's one that could cause some damage to my team. With that being said, Everton have actually been looking a bit more solid defensively with the signings of Cody and Tarkowski. They've started to really shore up that back line, but I do like Kane going forward. It seems to be very consistent. You can expect a goal return in every single game. Now, the final option that I'm looking at here is Ivan Toney of Brentford. A lot of people actually starting to move away from Ivan Toney or not really considering him as an asset. For me, I still think that Toney looks like a really good player up until the World Cup. He does play against Manchester City in game week 16, but he does also have good fixtures. You may look at them and think, the Brighton at home and then Chelsea at home, 2 sides that are performing okay so far this season. But the fact that it is at home is definitely very beneficial. Clubs' expected goals and just generally goals go up when they do play at home. As you can see there, Toney's expected goal return is 0.75, which is significantly higher than any player within the same price bracket as him. He's on penalties, and although Brentford lost pretty heavily against Newcastle at the weekend, because Brentford picked up a penalty, he got himself a goal, got himself a 5-pointer, and realistically that's all we're looking for from our strikers. In terms of negative, the only thing that I could say really about Toney is that it doesn't allow you to bring in maybe some of the more exciting other options like your Salah, like your Scamacca's or your Edouard, but I do think for me that Toney looks like a good option going forward. And I like the fact with Toney that he is just consistently going to be playing 90 minutes in each game. He's on free kicks, he's on penalties, so just leave him there until game week 15 and then take a punt in game week 16, and then you can take a punt. Then finally, we're going to be taking a look at some defenders, the category of players that have been performing the worst so far this season. Only Cancelo and Trippier have actually been performing pretty well so far this season, and you could argue the likes of Saliba, but I'm not really going to be looking at him because they do blank in at game week 12. The first player that we are looking at is Eric Dyer of Spurs. He's one of the highest performing FPL defenders so far this season, but even so, his points aren't particularly great. I'm going to mainly focus around the kind of cheaper defenders here because I think the more expensive ones aren't really viable options. Spurs are one of the better defenses so far this season with an expected goals conceded of 1.17. Dyer has managed to pick himself an attacking return in a goal. Now, Spurs going into game week 11 arguably have one of the better fixtures in terms of the potential of keeping a clean sheet. Playing against Everton, you would hopefully expect that they would keep a clean sheet in that game, and Dyer is one of those players at the minute that looks like you can just kind of stick him in there and he will pick you up points in the majority of game weeks. In terms of negatives, the thing is for me at the minute is that defenders don't look particularly good, so the majority of sides aren't really keeping many clean sheets. I guess it's just deciding out of those which ones are going to give you the most points, and at 5.1 million, Dyer actually offers a bit of a cheaper option and a way into a decent solid Spurs defence, and Dyer is getting consistent minutes in that team. Now, next player we're looking at is Cucurella of Chelsea. Coming back from injury, he looked good in that Chelsea team, managing to pick up a clean sheet that has been quite elusive for Chelsea so far this season. Many of us who had Reece James in their side would have been quite disappointed after seeing Reece James blank and get 1 and 2 pointers so far this season. For Chelsea to finally pick up a clean sheet and Reece James not to be a part of that side was quite frustrating. As you can see, the expected goals conceded from Chelsea a little bit better here than Spurs, but the main thing for Cucurella for me is the potential of rotation. We saw Graham Potter rotate the likes of Sterling, Aubameyang, Reece James ahead of their next Champions League game, ahead of a tightly packed run of fixtures. And I think going forward, that Chelsea, there is going to be quite a bit more of that Chelsea rotation. But the fact that Cucurella is quite a bit cheaper than Reece James means that he is a good potential viable option. He managed to pick himself up a couple of bonus points in that Wolves game, and for a 3-0 victory, I'd say that is pretty impressive, especially with the fact that he didn't get any kind of attacking contribution in there as well. Would I be looking to bring him in for this coming game week though? They do play against Aston Villa away from home, so it's a pretty decent fixture. Obviously away from home, we don't necessarily expect teams to keep a clean sheet, but I would say out of fixtures that are being played this weekend, they are definitely in the more likelihood than not likelihood to be picking up a clean sheet. With that being said, will he actually play in game week 11? I guess that is yet to be seen. A player though that I think is a must-have in the majority of people's teams, and I feel like a lot of people do own Cancelo, but if you don't own him, it is time to bring him in. I think even with the potential of a game week 12 blank, just the potential that this man has to send your rank flying down is absolutely absurd. He picked up a goal and an assist along with a clean sheet, just about making it to the 60th minute mark, so he picked up the clean sheet points as well, scoring himself 18 points at the weekend. I actually think that Manchester City are going to keep a clean sheet, and Cancelo down that Liverpool right hand side is going to cause a lot of havoc. The way he was attacking and bombing down that side was extremely dangerous. You can see that also Manchester City are just clear in terms of expected clean sheets than any other side here, and I really only have positive things to say about Cancelo other than the fact that they do blank in game week 12, so if you don't own him, maybe hold off until game week 13, but as I say, the potential to lose out by not owning this man is very high indeed. Then we're moving on to a couple more differential options, as for me, mainly the premium defenders don't look good, so we have to be looking towards more of the cheaper options so that we can provide more money into the midfield and attack, so we can get the likes of Bowen and Foden in the same team together, so we can get the likes of Harry Kane. We're looking towards players like Joachim Anderson for Crystal Palace. Now, Crystal Palace defensively so far this season haven't been too great, but the main thing for me with Anderson is that he does provide aerial threat and is actually looking pretty decent from an attacking point of view. His expected goal return is 0.23, which means that every 1 in 4 games he's expected to get an attacking return, which for a centre-back at 4.5 million, I'd say is pretty darn good. He's good for the bonus points. What I will say is they are playing against a lesser side in game week 11 who, yes, aren't particularly defensively sound, but going forward are looking particularly good. So I don't necessarily expect the Joachim Anderson and Crystal Palace to be keeping a clean sheet against Leicester away from home. But in game week 12, definitely one that I've got my eye on. Playing against a Wolves side so far this season that have really struggled to score, and I could actually see him hauling in that game, potentially grabbing himself a header. Castagna is another player that I do have my eye on at 4.4 million. He's managed to pick himself up 2 clean sheets in the last 2 games. Now, you may be wondering, but Bournemouth scored 2 goals in the last game. How does it happen? He got subbed off just after the 60th minute, so he managed to scoop up some bonus points as well. He did come off with an injury to his eye, so it'd be worth monitoring him going forward. But Castagna looking like a decent option. He has attacking threat and is good for bonus points. Leicester generally though aren't looking that great for clean sheets. As you can see there, they have the worst expected goals conceded out of any of the players here. So with the potential injury, I don't think I'd necessarily be looking at bringing him in for this game week when they play against Crystal Palace. And as highlighted in this video, I'm kind of bigging up Crystal Palace assets as being good to go for, because I do think they can score against the Leicester. But if you really want to punt, the Castagna could offer you quite a bit of a differential. Now, if you have enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Really does help me out. Let me know down in the comments any players that you're looking at bringing in for Game Week 11. We've got some few interesting decisions to make up ahead of us because of that Game Week 12 blank. A lot of people are going to be looking elsewhere in terms of captaincy, and because that Game Week is such like a quick turnaround between Game Week 11 and 12, we really have to start thinking and planning ahead for those moves. But yeah, if you are around here, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Comment down below any players you're thinking of bringing in, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.